All right. All right. So, hey, I'm going to be recording this so you guys know. Oh, wait. I think there's some feedback still. Hold on. No, feedback. Oh, still got air. Hold on. Hold on.
The mute button. Right, good. Echo test. Ooh, I can hear myself.
I know because I think we're still. I'm just trying to check to make sure this promos are over. So we had to set up I'm recording this myself because our main servers are down for the show. So they put up a temporary server so that, people can hear it live on the studio. So that's kind of like what we're doing.
Oh,
Fair enough.
okay.
Yeah. So a lot of problem solving this morning, but that's radio. Okay.
I could imagine.
Yeah, all right. So I think that we are, in case nobody heard that, our main servers are down, and our management is the rockinest management that we could ever have here at Revolution Radio. I swear they solve all kinds of problems. So we put up a temporary studio today so that you could hear our shows while the main one's down, which means that I'm, having to personally record this so that I can actually put it up. So I'll have a archive of it. So we probably will not have a main archive of it on the show in our archives, so people know. All right, so I'm super excited today. So you're listening to the Saturday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes Radio. And I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and today is Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And also I have the Wednesday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, which is noon Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So so that way you know where I'm at. Also, our main founder of our studio, our network, passed away a few weeks ago. And so we are trying to keep his legacy alive. We're trying to keep Revolution Radio alive. We are like one of the last big truth networks out there. And so we need your support. We're 100% listener supported. And I do advertising on my network. You can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can look at how to support us. You can throw us a few bucks. You can get some really great heirloom seed packages. We have lots. So we would really ask for your help because we all are working really hard to keep the legacy and the network up. And making the transition necessary for being able to produce, having hosts producing amazing shows in the future, to bring you information that you're probably not going to hear on radio or TV anywhere else. And so also while you're at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, you can also check out me. Look on Studio A in the schedule, scroll down, see the bee with the flower, click on that thumbnail, and there's a back page with information. And if you want to contact me, that would be great too. If you have some ideas of having, oh, and guess who has showed up? Dr. Lenny, one of my really good friends. He must have seen all the commotion on Discord that these guys were going to be on. So looks like he is tuning in. All right, so I'm super excited because a tarting we will go, a tartini we will go. So anybody hasn't heard the word Tartarian, tarting, or any of that kind of stuff is in for a treat today. For the last 2 years, I've been trying to get people in the Tartarian movement on the show. I have to say that they are doing, groundbreaking work and educating the public on, things that are so beyond secret and hidden. it's kind of mind-boggling at times. I have had Roger Spur on my show from Mud Fossil University. He specifically just deals with the mud flood and the DNA and genetics. These guys find all kinds of different kind of historical things, photos, handmade pictures. That's how they did things back in the old days. They would hire somebody to, be at the war and write, draw up prints of what that looked like at that time. And so I'm super excited. So I've got Victor, Nathan, and Michael. And I have rummaged around them on Discord. They have actually some Discord places. So Victor, can you tell people where to find you? Do you have a YouTube channel, or are you just on Discord?
We mainly hang around the Certus Discord channel, which is the Tartary Certus Discord channel. You may have heard of him, Exertus on YouTube.
Right. Okay. So that's where you guys are around. Does Nathan have a other place that he posts stuff, or is he's involved with that as well?
Well, that is where we all three of us hang around.
Okay.
Nathan has his own place called The Corollary, but he is more, he is better suited for explaining that.
Okay, yeah. So Nathan, do you want to explain, if you're here, the corollary?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the corollary is, it isn't purely Tartarian. So we have with the Certus Tartary Discord, it was our first run at building a human library. And a lot of the issue being that when you go hunting for information, you're stuck with whatever someone shares with you and no one to talk to about it. And so the Certus Tartary Discord is one of the first places we were able to make that was a library of living people. If you had a question or a line of research that you needed help with or feedback on, you have people to ask. And so the corollary is the natural offshoot, just built for research assistance.
Great. Is there any other place that you go where people can find you?
Yes, actually, though I don't post there often, just in the comments and harvesting information. Stolenhistory.org. It is a very good site for this sort of thing.
Awesome. Okay, and then Michael, do you have a place where you can be found?
I have a YouTube channel under the name 13th Monkey.
Oh, that's right.
It's not all that active, but we upload the recorded chats we do for the Certus Tartary there. And I make occasional videos on Star Forts.
Awesome. All right.
That's
well, I have
sort of my whole area of research to begin with.
Awesome. Well, that's very exciting because I really like Star Forts and I've seen some of the stuff presented. And so I'm going to have lots of questions for all you guys. So one of the things that I wanted to maybe talk about, and then you guys can just rip it, and then I'll just kind of peek in every once in a while, is one of the things that was a huge turning point for me. But, I've been following, people like Jordan Maxwell for years, Tellinger, just a lot of other people who, are barely kind of touching the surface of some of this stuff. So it wasn't totally out there for me, but I think like the real turning point for me was when the Tartarian community started presenting, because I watched the UAP, also Wise Up, a lot of the people that are on there. I'm just very interested in what they have to offer and say. But a lot of you are also reading ancient texts. You're getting stuff translated. You're finding, all kinds of, historical stuff that's been removed. But I think the turning point for me that really kind of helped me with the mechanism of war and what they're really using war for was from the Civil War, when it was kind of sort of discovered that they used the Civil War to actually blow up Tartarian age buildings. And that, I was thinking about, like, what's the big thing that just happened recently was that, the US pulled out of Syria. Why? Because there's no more artifacts to destroy. There's no more history to destroy. And, they had, gotten rid of it all. So that was kind of a big turning point for me when, you start realizing, like, there's just another level of lies and another level of deceit. And then, I'm totally in agreement that I think that the Tartarians were, probably also the Phoenicians, and because of the Admiralty law, the maritime law, the law of the water that, almost the whole world has embraced. And then, the legal end of it, turning people into actual vessels, and hospitals and legal facilities are all ports of entry. So, what are your guys' thoughts? I mean, we could talk about, but probably might be nice to talk about how you guys, what was the turning point individually for you guys? What really changed, that moment in your life where you just went, oh my God, this is like just totally what I'm going to be into and what I'm going to be studying, and also want to educate the public.
Maybe, yeah, I'll go first then. I think with the Tartaria thing, for me, it has been a long journey of discoveries, and a lot of them very harsh and horrifying. And this Tartaria thing was a positive thing. It was a light in a very dark room. So I enjoyed most of all the pictures that went along with it, all the art, and it was a visual study of history, because most of us didn't knew many of the languages we were studying pictures from, very ancient text in Latin and Greek, and sometimes very ancient languages. And so we took most of the visual stuff, and you make do with what you have. And we have learned a lot since then, and we're still learning, every day. And so this Tartaria thing was a turning point for me in a very, harsh reality, a brave new world, so to speak. And I think it is very important to be on a more positive note, and learn from the ancients, and seek its inspiration in what they did. I think that is all very positive, and we should try to leave aside some of the more negative stuff, so to speak, such as, false flags and geopolitics, and they are all very important. But for me, I think I reached my my point where I needed something more positive, and I can see that effect in a lot of people, especially people that I hadn't expected would be interested in it. A lot of old friends have shown interest in it, and I think that is very important. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
just to kind of add to that real quick, was probably one of the most profound moments. I saw a video that somebody put up in the Tartarian community that showed in Asia, like a Chinese built freestanding, more like a canopy building, where people could be underneath it, and that the traditional way that it was built, and then the wind started humming through it, and it had an antenna, and it showed the electricity, right? The
Yeah.
emanating the electricity. And that was just like, people wouldn't be looking for that kind of stuff if it wasn't for the movement. I mean, that we've had alternative power, we've used, wind and water and things for thousands and thousands of years to generate power. That was, for me, super positive to actually see that video. It was so amazing. But go ahead. Is Michael going to come on about his past and what happened and how he got here?
Well, it's the same for me as for Victor. I saw two things flying into buildings, because I'm still not convinced they were aeroplanes. Way back in 2001, and that's where I started digging. Went about the same journey as Victor. Dark, deep, nasty places, and I was pretty much done after 2017. I took a year off. Figured out that taking off is not an option, but then I wanted something positive, and I think the first time I encountered Tartary was Max Egan's alternative history video. And that led me to more, and eventually to the Discord.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Max is such an amazing person, isn't he? I just love him. I love his voice too. It's kind of like hypnotic. He never really gets really upset, and he just presents like super great information. Love him.
Yeah, I agree. Shout out to Max.
Same.
Yeah. Hoot hoot. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
No, that was pretty much it. I ran
All right.
into a video of Star Forts, and that got me going. And I've been at that ever since December last year, I think.
Yeah, so your work is probably a lot of the Starfort work that I've seen. There was a Russian woman called New Earth who had a channel, and I was watching a lot of her stuff for a while. I think she had
Yeah,
a
Sylvie
channel.
Ivanova, yeah, on New Earth channel.
Yeah, and she started talking about star forts. I was just blown away because, I have a lot of native friends, and I've studied with a lot of native medicine people and shaman people, and there are certain patterns and structures that they use for ceremonial purposes that activate, multidimensional fields. And so when I started seeing a lot of these star forts, I started going, well, there you go. And then they use devices or technology that most people wouldn't consider devices or technology, like drums, because they start to open the frequency, they start to move the energy, right? They start to actually put in the electrical energy into the structure of whatever they built, the ceremonial area or whatever, or however it's going to go. And so all of it kind of works together. But it's all very, earth technologies, you know what I mean? So when I started to see the star forts, and how they all looked and where they were all at and how they were kind of near water and all kinds of different things, I just, almost fell out of my chair because it went back to a lot of the, native works that I was trained in and learned. So yeah, so pretty incredible. Okay, so now we're on Nathan. Nathan has the sexy voice. No, I'm just kidding. Nathan, you're up.
Thank you. That means a lot. So getting on to the Tartarian angle of research, I follow everything. And initially, when you look at a lot of these ideas, when you go silicon trees, and you go giant trees, giants, massive Earth, flat Earth, NASA moon hoax, they all sound a bit much to begin with. And you see a lot of people referencing old research, but not a lot of newcomers get that research, and so it just sounds hokey and baseless. But that's only at first. Now, my first taste of Tartaria came from the architecture. And now this is something that if you're going to begin the Tartaria discussion with anyone, then you can point out historical inconsistencies in architecture based on geography. If we did not find ourselves in Japan until a certain year, then why are there so many star forts in these areas? Why is
it's
it
a
that
very good question.
Oh, yes. And why is it that we have incredible architecture all throughout America, and yet we do not build in this way anymore? And these buildings are being targeted and destroyed. Now, there's a specific user. He's on Stolen History. It's Trismegistus. He just posted a recent article about the destruction of a bank building in America, and it took the largest American wrecking balls 6 months of 5 days a week, 40-hour work weeks to bring this building to the ground. A single building. They said it was one of the toughest. And when you look at that, it's evident that something before us created this. And I went from there. It just amazes me. And we watch everything. But the architecture is one of the easiest ways in. And that's the way I took.
Awesome. So, if you were, I know that Nathan is only here until the break, that he was only able to be here for the first part. And I hope to have, if you guys are interested, I would love to also have you guys on individually. I have some openings in November so that you can kind of talk about your, expertise. No, I'm just kidding. The other thing too I like about the Tartarian group is that you all kind of work together. You all communicate, you all share, you all present, which is like different than most people out there who are actually fight against each other. And so I really like how you guys kind of come together and everybody's, angles and information can be presented and everybody thinks about them thoughtfully. And you can actually, then it helps everybody to put bigger pieces together. And so I really appreciate that on the positive side. So if you guys could talk to people about, what you think is important to start the search or, major important places to look or things that are specific to people gathering information or looking down the rabbit holes, and from your own experience or your own what you're presenting. So could you talk about that, like getting people started?
Well, maybe I should talk about that because, well, also Mike, but I will say that what got me started and what has, contributed a lot to the research and the videos on Exertus channel is going through national archives digitized on the internet. And it's
Endlessly.
very easy. Yeah, endlessly. I do that basically all day. And
Victor's the hero.
well, I do it like aimlessly also. I just type in a word. Sometimes I will go specifically on Tartary, or sometimes I'll just type in I'll just go in a section like old maps and take it from A to Z or A to C. And what we find is a completely different view of history when you go into the archives. And if you are there long enough, you'll see stuff that just doesn't ring true with the presented history or the official stories. And especially old newspapers from the Library of Congress has rocked my world in how I view history. Also very recent history, only 150 years ago, everything was completely different and people thought about stuff in a completely different way. And it seems there was a freedom of press all over the civilized world that we have not seen too much of, but it's still present there in the archives. And some of the things will just sound like reading a fantasy novel or a sci-fi fiction story at times. But you can sometimes correlate it with other stuff so as to, get more validation behind it. But we are in, the realm of history, and there's a lot of forgeries going on. So you have to be critical all the way through. But what I can say is that in the archives are things that you have never heard about and things that will sound completely outlandish, but is still, there as official history, but buried in an archive, dusted away. No one seems to be looking at it. So I find that extremely interesting. It's so accessible, but
Give us an
yeah.
example.
Well, I'm sitting with one here. I found one not recently, well, very recently, and it's about Tartaria. So from the Library of Congress, we can read that according to the light thrown out by philology, that the following outline is what is believed true by Max Muller and many other great scholars of the present age. Not less than 10,000 years ago, there lived in and about the country called Tartary, the original tribe of white men, who called themselves Aryan, or the men. This tribe, the fathers of terrestrial civilization, spoke a language called Sanskrit. About the time they became half-civilized, a great disturbance of the earth ensued, causing the upheaval of the now desert of Gobi, the Atlas Mountains, the north of Asia, and of Europe, and the sinking of the beds of what is now the Caspian and the Mediterranean seas. This dispersed the tribe, gave rise in some way to the fiction of the flood, Noah, the ark, and so forth. A part of this people went to Europe and another to Hindustan. Owing to climatic and other influences, the Indian portion progressed a great deal faster than the European part. And from them spread civilization to Chaldea, Persia, Egypt, and Greece. A great man amongst them, called Menon, the legislator, became the prototype of the fictions of the Minos, of the Greeks, and the Egyptians, and the Moses of the Jews. All this was lost to the learned world. So there you go. Mud flood, ancient origins of the Aryans, the mythologies of the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Persians, and the Chaldeans, all explained in a few paragraphs.
Yeah, we are so dumbed down. You know, I have a friend of mine who he's is white. He's like 77. Well, I'll probably have him on my show. And he studied with, like a guru from India on a place, a farm in Virginia. And his guru, had like 3 PhDs, and he studied the Vedas and knew like in history from India. And I remember us talking one time. He was trying to help me teach how to cook for Brahma, which is God. They have like chef schools that they go to in India so that they can cook, for people these ancient dishes that actually bring about health. They're cures. That's what Ayurvedic medicine is founded on, is the food as medicine. And he was talking about how in the Vedas that not only did they have, vimanas, which are these flying, metallic crafts, but they had what they call, in translation in English, is continents, floating continents, floating land masses that would float around, that had different types of people on them. And periodically these floating land masses in the air would like go to war over an area, like on the earth. And so, you think about like how much history, things that you just don't know about, like just what you're talking about, the mud flood in this paper, and what people talked about. I mean, how old is that paper? I mean, what's the date on that?
About 1850s. I can find the reference, but it's usually around there where you get the weird stuff. And it's also there where they begin the whitewashing of history. It's all happening in the 19th century. And if you go into and watch, for instance, Philip Drashinin or Static in the Attic, they will talk a lot about the 19th century. And everything seems to have been rediscovered or discovered or thought of or invented in the 19th century. And it also seems to be stretched out. There's a phenomenon called the long 19th century, and Static in the Attic talks a lot about it. And it's basically the idea that the 19th century was longer than 100 years and was stretched somehow to include, or perhaps not include, a lot of history. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because then they changed the. So I'm just going on what I remember seeing on this, right? Because you guys are the experts. So I'm the average Joe out here trying to figure it out. No. So wasn't there speculation that they changed it? It was like how it was written. Wasn't there like an L at the front of the date or something like that, or some kind of symbol at the front of the date, and then they just removed the symbol?
Yeah, it's
Isn't that how?
basically,
Yeah.
yeah, it's called, flamenco calls it, can you spot me, Nathan? Is it the phantom timeline hypothesis?
So this is the missing 1,000 year hypothesis.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was brought about with flamenco following the work of a man named Morozov, who said that there were about 300 missing years. And you can find that book, or a book very like it. It's called A Guide to the Phantom Dark Age. And the I and the J being so interchangeable in so many lexicons, and especially on a phonetic angle, it's strange to see them both. But we have to keep in mind when we look at the year that it's a really recent invention, that we know how old we are and that we know what year it is. Typically, let's say 300 or 400 years ago, you would pass someone on the street and you would say, "What year is it?" And they would say, "It's the year of my Lord 37, or the year of our Lord, let's say Francis, the year of our Lord Francis, the third of his name." They knew the years by the lives of the monarchies. And so, with the inevitable stretching of history to make a dynasty seem more all-encompassing or longer, a lot of the timeline got fudged and a lot of things got pushed in there with it. It's an incredible discrepancy, and it's still being argued over.
Well, that is just so fantastic. I'm so glad I have all you guys together. I can try to sort out my own, mental complexities dealing with the Tartarian mudflood stuff.
Well, go for it. What's another topic that you've always wondered about?
Well, thanks for the great explanation on how they've gotten around and creating, different time periods, right? Timelines. That was such a great piece on it to give people an idea. I don't know, I think a lot about, for example, Sanskrit, like he was reading that article, Sanskrit is something that always interests me, because a lot of my native friends have, and I call them the original people, right? They're some of the original people. They have, like the Hopis have 4 extinction stories, that they've survived 4 extinctions on this planet. And it amazes me that people don't ever want to listen to these people, that, oh, it's just a story, it's just a myth, they make it up. It's not. It's oral history. It's actually fact, that's why
Yeah.
they tell people. So a lot of my teachers say that, native people learned what was called the sing-songy language, where it sounds like it's more a song. And, the more I started studying, like, Sanskrit and listening to their language is considered in this modern time the language of light, because it actually creates a frequency when it's spoken, right? An energy field. And is
Well,
spoken.
you
Go
know
ahead.
where you can find this language still alive today? You can find it on one of the Canarian islands. La Gomera has a native population of, I think, perhaps 1,200 left. UNESCO protected, of course, because they get their hands in everything. But they have a singing language, and it was created by farmers living on the slopes of the mountains, because it's a very mountainous island. So they could whistle or sing to each other from peak to peak, and it's amazing. And I have thought about what you just said is a thing I have thought about a lot. And when I was there, I found out Angela Merkel visits the island every Easter, so she seems very interested in the place as well. And it has a lot of I suspect it has a lot of grottos, and it has volcanic activity, so there may be black goo there as well, but that's another topic, of course. um,
Yeah. That's a whole
uh,
other topic we should talk about on a different time frame.
yeah.
Because that will just overload people. They'll just fall out of their chairs. That's just a really intense one.
But the
Um,
singing language, yeah,
yeah,
they have it there on La Gomera. Very interesting, and yeah, you should look into that and try to listen to how it sounds, because I would love to get my hands on like some magnetic readings on how, or some visual cymatics on their language would be cool.
yeah. Well, another thing too is these people that practice some of more of this, these ancient languages, these sing-songy languages. Um, they use them to activate the world. So they used your voice could activate something, how you spoke, how it sounded, how in your throat, and it could actually throw out a frequency, right? So, like I know with my native teachers, we have different songs that have different kinds of drum beats, and the way that the songs are, it depends on, what relation, you're dealing with your relations, which are the relationships of everything outside of you, and communicating to those different relations, which opens up like different kinds of energy fields, and also ways to communicate, kind of, let's call it psychically back and forth, kind of opens up that field. So I think about like, languages that aren't dead like English. um, what could you, what could be your, obviously anything can be used for bad, destruction, and anything can be used for good, you know, and the benefit of all. So we have to be kind of very careful. But I think a lot about that of languages, like these energy fields that they were all creating, they were using their voices. They could use, different kinds of clapping and snapping and how they move their bodies to create. And a lot of the ancient shamanism practices that I've studied, they have these movement forms that actually generate power in the energy field and change magnetics. Um, and so I just think, I'm kind of on the healthcare end, alternative medicine, and I use a lot of energetic medicine with people. So that's kind of like, I think where my foothold gets in there. How do we make the environment healthier, and that
Mm,
how do we generate power, and all the things that we probably used before.
yeah, I would think that Mike and Starford's is a natural way into this conversation. Mike,
Well,
on the
Yeah.
yeah,
topic of
every
frequencies, Starford's is really on topic, wouldn't you say?
every big city that was a star fort has a church, and a church has an organ, and an organ emits a whole lot of frequency. Very what is it? A lot of different frequencies, and every frequency can be healed to, or can be used to heal.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. So
So,
how do you think, okay, so in case people don't know, they're like the second largest organ in the world. is at Balboa Park in San Diego. And so anybody that ever gets a chance to go there on Sundays at 2 p.m., they have an organ player come. And they open the whole thing up. It's an outdoor amphitheater, and you can just go and listen. And it's a trip. It's kind of a trip how
Wow.
the sound kind of vibrates and radiates out.
Yeah, and imagine like these church organs now, they play like hymns and stuff. What if they just emitted one continuous frequency and you gathered in that auditorium to get healed from ailments?
Yeah.
And the same thing can actually be applied on an even broader level if you design your city to propagate the sound.
Waveguides.
Waveguides and corrugated horns.
Yeah, yeah, and I love Global Vision did some really awesome videos back a year ago on how different antennas and the tops and how things can be radiated and like the horns and how sound works, which was really educational for me, really helpful.
When we saw that Global Vision video, Mike and I began to hunt for that with his star forts, and we found a proponents of evidence. There's so much, it's staggering. It would be foolish to look at it and dismiss it.
Cities were probably designed like especially the larger ones were probably designed as places of healing and shelter, and not as places to live in.
Don't you remember that that map of Spain and Portugal we found from Gallica, where it shows all the perhaps semi-big cities, and of course all the biggest ones in Spain? That would be like perhaps 150 cities. All
if
were
not more,
star
Victor.
citadels. Yeah,
That's it.
It's crazy, and we have that map, and it's all in plain view.
And it's hard to convey the Star Fort stuff on a radio show, but if you look on Google Earth and you go to the old cities like Berlin and stuff, you can see that these cities were designed with a thing in mind.
Yep.
And more than just to house people, because they were designed according to a setup that has more going for it than just, hey, we can house people here. Because there's not one of these cities that looks the same. Not one is a copy of the other. They may look alike, but not one is the same.
So I'm just gonna kind of throw some stuff out there. I'll tell kind of a brief story. So one of my teachers, I consider him a medicine man. He is older. He has traveled around to lots of different kinds of tribes. He teaches traditional ceremonial ways and things like that. He had an experience where he was at Lake Tahoe, and he's would be in mainstream modern people, we would call him psychic, but he's getting his vision, right? And getting a vision, he's seeing things that are on what we may not all see, but they see, and these beings talk to them from the past, their ancestors. Anyway, he was at Lake Tahoe and he was sitting on the beach, and this grandmother ancestor rose from the water and told him that he needed to fix the water globally. She said that the water's vibration is detrimental now, like to humans and all life, and that he needed to do these. And this is way long before Tartarian and a lot of this other stuff ever came out, and that he needed to create a pattern, this star pattern, and this is how the ceremony needed to be, and that you would take it to the different places near water, and it would release all of the murder and the violence and everything from the water, so that the water could raise its vibration to basically save the planet. And so, when I started seeing a lot of that Star Fort stuff, I started thinking about like his ceremonies, that he was taking to water to the water, in different places, and that he would release these, energies that have been, jammed into the water. And so the water just keeps putting out a frequency of these negative energies like murder, because a lot of Native people were murdered, especially in America. I mean, 60 million Native people were slaughtered. So there isn't any place that you can go in the United States that isn't going to have this overwhelming, original sin. And then
Well,
everything is collected on top of it.
it's
So
interesting about the genocide of the Native Americans. I have come to sometimes doubt some of the very large, not the recent genocides, but perhaps the Native American genocides could have been to cover up a natural event or a very large weapon, and not a regular war, so to speak, because they need you to see history as a long succession of wars, because they need people to have what is called in philosophy a negative anthropology. They need people to have that, oh, our ancestors or our immediate ancestors were all engaged in war, and yeah. So it enforces the Darwinian way of seeing the world. That is my
well,
take on it.
yeah. And the thing is like, I know personally from Native people that witnessed, military actually coming into their area and gunning down all of their people.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the
So,
recent. That is in living memory.
yeah.
I don't doubt that. But the very ancient stories about Columbus and the Spanish slaughtering and doing all their dirty work might not be true. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the thing is you have to go to the store, try to go to the source of the history, to learn what the history really was, because we can't really get a straight answer for sure.
Yeah,
But so I
yeah.
was thinking about, so what's the activation? So before I started getting into the Tartarian stuff, there's also some of the crop circles. Um, I unfortunately have a history of dealing with extraterrestrial, and that's just how it is. And most of it has not really been that positive. But I also know that some of the crop circles are real and some of them are not. The ones that are real have more of the weird kind of like frequency. They have more kind of a design that the average person wouldn't understand. They're trying to convey, um, tell us something, but in a frequency, looking structure, and if we knew what that frequency was, that design, we could actually figure out what they were trying to actually tell us. But one of the things that it reminds me of, crop circles also remind me of the hoop, the sacred hoop, or the ceremonial area, that they have. And so I think about star forts in the same way that I think about crop circles and all this other stuff. What's the activating? What if we're supposed to like use some kind of energy field to activate the hologram of the crop circle, but because a lot of us don't really know what that is, we can't go there and put into the frequency to move it, morph it into a more of a hologram, so that maybe it's going to tell us something, it's going to talk to us. And so I think about like star forts too, like, they could have used organs and stuff like that, but what's the activation? What would activate, what do you think would activate the star force into full blown, vibrational energy frequency, that could actually ignite and maybe actually start to heal the water that it's on, or the land? I mean, do you guys have any idea about that?
This is where the human library comes into play. We actually have a member who has been digging into crop circles for some time, with the idea that they may actually be three-dimensional and represented in 2D, and that is disintegral or disintegral on our Discord.
Oh yeah, disintegral. Yeah.
Yes, he
Shout
he's the
out to
one
Lee.
we would. Yes, he's the one we would point you to. But as for the activation of a star fort, first we need to know what generation the Star Fort is, because there are recent editions and there are much older ones, and also the purpose. And this is actually so widely contested that there may not be a single answer.
I don't think
Fantastic.
in Origins they were meant as forts. I'd much rather prefer to call them stars.
Yeah. Well, I would
Because
say. Yeah, sorry, Mike.
now the layout of some of them is just too dumb to consider them as military.
Yeah, agreed.
It's not a dumb layout, don't get me wrong. It's too dumb to use it as a military thing.
Yep.
Why would you have your bastion points pointing inward, inland, while you actually have a harbor city? What is that harbor city needing defense from? The land or the sea?
Well, we already busted them, Mike, because the whole military argument rests
Is
upon
nonsense.
the medieval 14, 15, 1600s conception of history, wherein you have cannons and gunpowder. It was newly discovered, and suddenly you needed an update to your old castles because you needed these 45-degree angles to somehow
The blind spot
block
excuse.
the cannonballs, and so to speak. But we have found documentation in what I would say is a very good source, because it's called The History of Civil Engineering, and it talks about star forts in the Roman era or around the time of Christ. That would be, in the official narrative, 1,000 years before the invention of gunpowder. And I remember being in a debate with somebody over this, and he said, well, then they used the star fort points to, counter arrows and raiders. And it just got ridiculous at that point, because that is not documented anywhere. They need their gunpowder to have their star forts. And we have Star Wars way before they say they had gunpowder, or else
60,
we need to
62
accept.
AD, right?
Yeah, but otherwise we need to accept that Romans had musketeers and stuff like that. So either way, history is busted in this respect, and it's
Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing. So we're going to get ready to go to break in like 1 minute. So I just want to say you're listening to Carrying Stones Digging Holes radio show. I'm having like a really awesome, I feel like I'm having a private consultation on some of my questions. But we're going to be back in the second hour. We're going to go to a 6-minute break, which will bring us to about 2 after. So we're going to mute out during that time frame. And you're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can help support us if you would like. And we are going to get ready to go to break. I have Michael and Nathan and Victor on today, and we're talking about ways to find them on Discord, Tartarian, Disintegral. Also, there was different websites, the Colliery, and there was also the other one, Lost History. Okay, everybody, we're on break. We'll see you back in 6 minutes. Thank you. Mute out. All right, everybody. Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. We're into the second hour on the Saturday edition. Saturday edition is 1 p.m. Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern. Wednesday edition, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, is noon Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern. And today I have some feedback. Oh, maybe we're not done with the promos. Oh, hold on. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, anyway, we are talking to, we went tarting today. We're talking to Tarts, and we are talking about mud floods and Tartarianism. Tartarianists are communicating with us about different topics, interesting topics, things that I've been thinking about a lot that I'm getting to ask actual real questions and getting to put my 2 cents in, so it's very exciting. So we lost Nathan. Nathan is busy for the rest of the day, so hopefully we'll get him back on in November when I have some guest openings. He wants to talk about languages, so that'll be an amazing topic to have with him. So we still have Victor and we still have Michael. And so where do you guys want to head off since we only have an hour? I'll let you guys kind of run with what you want to talk about.
Yeah, I wanted to really get out to people Mike's work, or also our work, I would say it has nearly become, but mainly Mike. So Mike, if you could present what we have and what you have been doing.
Well, I find star forts on Google Earth in a nutshell, and you provide me with a lot of old maps that come from those same open source libraries that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
To date, I can safely say we have about 2,500 different old maps.
Yeah, so,
different cities and locations, that is, and then we have a bunch of doubles from different areas and ages.
So we're building a comprehensive in Google Earth star fort map of the world. So to show people like how many are there really out there, and we're also cataloging them in different characters. So some star forts are pinned as visible today, and others are located from or located by ancient maps I have found where you cannot see them anymore. They have either been destroyed or they are under the earth, or something else. And we also so in total we have, I would think, more than 5,000 different locations on a Google Earth map spanning the whole world, from remote locations such as the Far East and Madagascar and all over Africa and South America, Chile, Argentina, just remote places and star forts in the middle of nowhere in Kazakhstan, for instance. So they're very anomalous and they bust history. As Nathan pointed out earlier on the show, Japan has so many star forts. And the weird thing about Japan, and what is the argument against history, is that Japan wasn't opened up to Europeans until, what was it, Mike? The 1840s?
Yeah,
50s?
somewhere in that time period. The Dutch, I think, were the first allowed in.
Yeah. So the argument is that star forts are built by or invented by or popularized by French or European forces, military forces. So if that is true, how come there are more than 100 star forts in Japan if Japan did not communicate with Europe? How could they have known the star forts? And unless people will tell me that they are all built between 1840s or 50s, and well into the photographic era where that could have been documented, but it is not, because it's not the story in Japan. Right, Mike?
There's one quote unquote official star fort in Japan, and that was built quote unquote again with the excuse of it being an homage to Western military architecture.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
a major cover-up. So what do you guys think that the star forts, what's your ideas about what the star forts did? Could you tell people more about their locations? Kind of maybe what you
Locations is
think
for
that the
Mike.
star forts did and the locations, because I know that a lot of them are kind of either on islands or tips of areas where they kind of are close to water as well.
That's true. They are very usually
Water-
found around
Water is key.
canals. Yeah,
Water
canals
is a
and
key
stop
element.
forts. Yeah,
So what do you
It's
think?
it's either a river or a canal that they're connected to, and if they're in the hills, I'll safely assume they're on a water source, a spring or a well or something like that.
Yeah, and actually, when it comes to the efficacy or purpose of star forts, I think our group has gotten a lot of ways, or a long way, especially with additions from, or very good, brilliant research from Philip Joshinin, who has, together with Sylvie Ivanova from New Earth Channel, um, put out the idea that star forts were gas mining factories or stations. And Mike and I actually agree that a lot of them were used for that purpose. But
Okay,
we have
so what was
also
that
seen
gas? What? Like
gas
gas?
mining, as in fracking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, apparently modern day fracking stations actually create four-sided star forts to I don't know why they do it. It's still a big question for me. I would like to ask Philip if he knows. So maybe I'll do that on a future talk with Philip, because we have talked before on his YouTube channel, Philip Joshinin. But I don't know why, but Philip has shown evidence that modern day fracking companies create star forts in in and around their industrial sites to accommodate their fracking machines somehow. It's really
Wow,
weird.
that's pretty weird. So
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean, so there's ideas or thoughts that the star forts could have been gas stations,
Yep.
basically.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a gas
Definitely.
empire. Yeah.
So so yes. Do you think, okay, so this is going to be a kind of a crazy thing. Do you think that they could have been a gas station docking station, like flying docking? Because okay, so there was this crazy movie. Sometimes you have to go back to look at movies and what they tell you is fiction, because some of it
I'm
actually
with you.
may actually be real. But it
Yeah.
made a lot of sense to me with the pyramids like in Egypt. And so there's this old movie, I think Kurt Russell's in it, and it's called Stargates, like from like 1985. And I remember seeing it when I was young, because I would have been a senior in 87. But I had forgotten that I had seen it. And since that time, I've done, like everybody else, a lot of study on different things like pyramids and what have you. And in the movie, they have Ra, who is this kind of energy being who possesses this kid's body. And then, he interacts with the world in this kid's body, Ra, the sun god. And then his ship, it's all like electronic. It's kind of a trip, but it ports on top of the pyramid, right? So it comes down and it ports. It has like a triangle, slat in the bottom of the flying saucer, and then it lands on the very tip of the pyramid. And then once it makes contact, then it's like plugged into an energy field. Do you think like a star fort would have I think about this stuff. I know it's kind of out there, but that the Star Fort was maybe a landing port, do you think? Or do you think it was just an ocean vessel port for gas? I'm just trying to.
Well, first of all, we operate on the like we see the ancients as thinking of multi-purpose um, efficacy for the technology and for everything they do, and it's in line with the syncretist philosophy and the perennial philosophy that, for instance, the Neoplatonists of official history talk about. I will say that they are very much alike, and for me, it seems like the star forts were um, they were used for a lot of different things. And we mentioned gas mining, fracking, but a lot of the
So a lot
stuff I
of
find is communication is the word that goes along with the star forts a lot. And they had communication galleries, and the lines connecting them are called communication lines. And we have asked ourselves, how does it make sense? Are we supposed to believe they are just tunnels for runners or couriers of people running in long tunnels? I think not. We think that there was a pneumatic or gas system of perhaps tubes wherein you could transport, such as in, a hyperloop, the modern day hyperloop thing, such an perhaps even magneto trains, who knows? But the point is that the star fort seems to be centered around the idea of communication and commerce. Well, the word communication is very broad. You can take it as very broad because mediumship, occultism, and stuff like that is about communication. Money is about communication. Law is about communication. Everything is really communication on also a quantum level. Um, so, what is this word doing in all and around the star forts? We have asked ourselves.
Okay, so I just saw a video a couple days ago with a guy who his specialty in the Tartarian thing, he's into the underground tunnels. And so he was talking a lot about a lot of the tunnels that were in places and areas. And he showed that you could use a magnetic, you could push it into the tube and it would go all the way around the tube with like no effort. So he showed kind of the mechanical way that things could have been moved through these, they could have had pods of some sort that were moving things back and forth, probably even long distances. Like plus it would be safe from, I guess the upper part of the world. I mean, I think a lot about the Hopis, and they talk about the ant people that came to them before the flood, and that they took all their people underground and they lived underground for a long,
Well,
long time.
the ant people is very interesting because I have found some interesting evidence of who the ant people really
Ooh,
are.
I would like to hear this and more about star forts.
Okay, I'll just quickly say it because it doesn't really take a lot to say. Well, ants in many languages, especially Nordic and Indo-European languages, will be something around a letter starting with M and having A, E, R, or Y, and R in it. So it'll be Meyer, Myre in Danish, Mauer in
in
Old
Dutch it's
Norse.
mieren.
Yep. And so what are these words pointing to? It is pointing to no other than the Moors, the ancient Moorish civilization that me and Nathan have been investigating in America. And we have found both literary and art and also some scriptural evidence for this. And it seems to be a part of Tartaria. So there was a distinct Moorish faction and a distinct Aryan faction. And the Aryan faction lived in the eastern part of Asia, what was called in the Middle Ages Kitai or Katai. and there was a black part of Kitai called Kara Kitai, Kara being for black. And on the other side of the Bering Strait, the Tatars knew of a very highly advanced people of black color called Kara Kalmuks. And in the official history, we hear of the Kalmuk Tatars as well. So I'm thinking that you have the sons of Ham, as you know in the Bible. They were the Moors. They were in America, and they later got to Egypt somehow. So the original Egypt is America, and Nathan, if you ever get to talk to him on one hand, and I think he would have loved to have gotten into this today, is called something called the Amorites, which is found in the Bible. And there is a lesson to be learned about the Amory and who they are. And it figures into the Ant people that the Hopi talks about. And that story about the Ant people rescuing the Hopi is just a very wonderful love story of a Tartarian tribe rescuing another Tartarian tribe, in my mind. Because in all the old articles of the Library of Congress, we read that people of the 1800s thought that Native American Indians, why they were called Indians was because they were originally from Asia or Tartarian origins. And it's very interesting that all these, both they talk about the Tartarian center as called the Officina Gentium, or the big melting pot, or the big great working people. And they say that they basically seeded all the native peoples around the world, the Aboriginals, the Malaysians, the Polynesians, even the black Asians, or the Negro Asians as well, the Moors. And it's really crazy that most of what we, the common Tartarian theory is that it was a worldwide empire and it was somehow destroyed by a great catastrophe, and they were giants. And we have found evidence of all that and more. So it's really growing at this point. We're finding more and more. So it's very, very good to be a part of.
Yeah, listening to you speak, you get to certain things that you're speaking about, and I can tell that you're an empath, because when you start talking about the positive and the emotional part, and like one brother saving the other brother, right? Kind of thing, and I could just hear the emotion in your voice, and you just really connected with your heart, almost like brought me to tears. So it was super great. It was well received.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, I just could feel like, a whole bunch of love come out. So it was awesome. Anyway, I think most of the men who are involved in, with the Tartarian and mud flood are probably all kind of sensitive empaths on some certain level, looking for the truth and all of it, and being kind. You guys are all, no matter whether you're Global Vision or all these, all of you all are very interesting and out of the box, and you all are very loving and doing so much work for free for the public and the population, and bringing them facts, on what the history and the truth is. So you guys should receive, the Nobel Peace Prize for helping with peace around the world. So,
Well,
okay.
I'm not Jewish enough.
Oh,
Another thought I wanted to add to those star forts, Victor,
yeah,
is like,
yeah.
how much
Yeah, please.
helium does it take to fill up a dirigible?
Ooh, it's
What's
a
a
very good
dirigible?
question. Yeah, like an airship or a zeppelin. No, what's it
Yeah,
called?
Zeppelin.
Yeah,
The Zeppelin.
exactly.
Yeah. Helium. Could you gotten that from mining from a star fort? Well, I guess you could pump it
Yeah.
from. You could pump it through the underground networks too, right?
You could anchor a Zeppelin to a cathedral.
So what I have been noticing is in Europe, you have all the train stations they are very much red bricked and this old style, and they're very anomalous on who built them and when they got here, according to the stamp collections or photographic evidence. And I think that some of these train stations are repurposed as train stations because in these there were enough space to, create dirigibles. They were basically pumping out dirigibles at one time in antiquity and flying the whole world. I have books talking about something called the Empire of the Sky, and it's very hard to find anything more about it. And I think it's a synonym for Tartaria, but I'm not sure. And you mentioned Stargate and pyramids, and I remember Captain Kirk on YouTube once showing a letter written, I think, from a French guy talking about him being in Egypt and relating from Egypt that he saw the most wonderful thing, like this combat of pilots way back in the 1800s, way before the Wright brothers, I think. Pilots flying on what he called arrow fletches and going to and fro the tips of the pyramids. Very interesting. And the things you find in the old archives are just, weird because it also had that recent, it's very recent sometimes. And you think of such things as, well, if they existed, it was probably 1,000 years ago. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think, this is the cool thing about the Tartarian stuff is that it brings, there's a lot of people that are kind of in the ascension movement and they talk about things like timelines, but they talk about them in like a whole other kind of sense. And what your guys' work does is not only prove that that kind of stuff is going on, has been going on, could be going on, but you also like ground it into a very physical, like, yeah, here's what it looks like. here's
Yeah.
what it did, kind of a thing. It just amazes me.
And all by logical deduction, right?
Yeah, well, that
if you look at some of these old maps that we got, the level of detail, you can copy paste these maps over a city on Google Earth and it fits.
Yeah, it's astounding.
That's
like some of the maps from the 1700s, and you just overlay them perfectly on modern city plans, and they're perfect. And you can see you can, because we have so many, we have a natural bias for them at this point. So I in my bias, I use them to see, oh, this is how the landscape changed. Because if there's a variance between the old map, and now, I will believe, because I believe these old maps come from another people and they were extremely accurate, without us knowing how, but they were. And when I see these maps and I see the style, I immediately recognize, okay, this is part of the map collection that is very accurate. So I use them.
Good example is the Crimea, right?
Oh yeah.
If you go back to maps of the earliest world maps, I think is, what was that, Victor, 14 or 1500s?
Well, you have publications in the 16 and 1700s talking about, okay, this map is from the 19th or the 9th or 8th century, but they are publicized late in Renaissance period.
Well, the Crimea is a distinct feature. If you go to the Crimea now and you look at the oldest maps you can find of the world, the Crimea is a feature.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. I misunderstood what you were saying before. Yeah, that is correct.
That's what I meant by the recognizable features on maps and the level of detail these people were able to put down.
Yep. Also, just on the topic of Crimea, the cause of the mud flood is still a very big looming mystery, and Philip has been trying to nail it down. And I agree that some local mud flooding could be due to mining gone wrong, and perhaps on a larger scale that could also be the entire reason for the worldwide one. But I also think there is some evidence, and Philip also supports this, that mud volcanoes in the past was a much more regular and frequent occurrence. And the way that a mud volcano works is in line with the evidence of the buried buildings, I'd say. Because people ask, if it was a flood, how come it didn't knock down these or a lot of the buildings? Well, a mud volcano would, over a long period, just slowly spew out mud that would cover slowly and flow slowly into the cities. And it would, encapsulate them slowly. People would have time to evacuate, and it would probably have gone, perhaps more of it would have been a disaster on more, places with elevation, perhaps, because we do see people caught in the mud sometimes and dying, of course, because the mud was, at somewhere, in San Francisco, being like 100 feet at some point.
It's a fairly unpredictable thing, this volcano, but it also ties nicely into the Grand Solar Minimum.
Yeah, that would, I would think, produce more of a mud volcanic activity and more vibrations in the soil and more earthquake liquefaction and mud volcanoes in a good mix. And I think we have our cause for mud flooding of a lot of parts of the world. I'm asking, where do we not see it at this point?
Yeah. So just a thought. I was thinking about, these tunnels. I'm still kind of back on the tunnels. Sorry. Just kind of morphing into the tunnel part of the, underground structures where they could have moved gas. So I was watching, there's another guy, Levy. I watch his, I think is Levy, Levie.
John
Yeah,
Levy.
I really like his
Yeah.
because he has this music in the background, like symphony music, and he does his little thing. But I was watching one of his videos on finding photos, like, drawn stuff and other stuff where it looks like, yeah, the mud flood came in and pretty much wrapped itself around a lot of stuff. But they went ahead and like built a city back on top of that, right? So think about, what do you guys think about this? So then when they had the big earthquake, in San Francisco, around the turn of the century, the turn of one of the centuries, no, but and what happened right after? I wonder, do you think that there's still gas trapped in some of these tunnels, and that could cause,
Oh
like
yeah.
major explosions and burning down like a whole city? Like San Francisco burned, and it burned so severely from that earthquake and explosions and gas explosions. And it's like, but supposedly there wasn't a lot of that stuff going on in
Well,
San Francisco at that time. Do you think it could have kind of come from under the ground of all the stored gas?
I don't think exactly that was the reason.
Oh, okay.
If you look at Martin, he shows a very unique photograph or a panorama of the destroyed San Francisco, and it's high definition in the 1800s. It's very, it's actually quite amazing. His recent, you should all subscribe to Martin Liedtke.
Yeah, Martin is awesome.
Yeah,
I haven't
and
seen this
he
photo, by the way.
recently. Okay, but this photo shows you that the destruction of San Francisco was like, you have seen with California of recent, like it looks like a directed energy weapon event where everything is neatly burned some places and you can still see all the city grid, and it's very weird. You have this ordered destruction, right? Orderly destruction, or ordered chaos. I don't know.
Kind
It's
of
just
like
a
the Paradise
contradiction.
Fire in California.
Yeah, something like that.
Exactly like that.
Yeah, and all the or most of the large buildings in San Francisco were still standing there, but you could see entire city blocks were just, reduced to dust, but in this very rectangular or quadratic fashion. And the streets were all, on face value, clean and or orderly and perhaps cleaned up, but if that is true, it was a massive operation. And
I
the
just have.
picture or the photo Martin shows is really mysterious because when he had first shown it very early on his YouTube career, I think, and that original version did not include something that it has now. At some point down the line, a mysterious airship, steampunk airship, showed up on the photo, and it was like a Mandela effect. It's really weird. Something truly weird and strange happened on that photo. Either someone hacked it and edited it with a very good Photoshop, or a shift in timeline did actually occur.
Well, okay,
Really
so
weird.
there's this kind of story about that kind of stuff happening, but it happened with it talks about, there was like a documented story about on the East Coast, about the shaman medicine man of a tribe, and he watched an anomaly in the water in the ocean, and he couldn't see what it was being caused from, but it bothered him so much that he actually went out to the hilltop, put up his sleeping area and his food and everything, and he sat there and he watched it kind of day and night, this weird anomaly that he could see that wasn't natural in the ocean. And then I think it was like 3 weeks or 3 months or something like that, what happened was is that he could actually see what was creating the anomaly, but he saw the anomaly in the water first for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And then what he discovered was that it was Spanish type, big armada ships that were actually anchored offshore, but he only could see the change in the water, and it took him a long time to be able to adapt his mind and his filters to see what was actually creating it. So sometimes I think that as like a collective, we're not prepared to see something, because even though it's there the whole time, this is just my thought, until our mind can expand there. And then it's the 100 monkey thing, where one sees it and then the next person sees it, then everybody sees it.
Yeah, it's a quantum effect. I would also guess it's about collapsing the wave function, and when one does it in that unique manner, others start doing it as well. That is my personal opinion, but I think it resonates with some of the quantum heads.
Okay, so we're gonna like pressure Michael. Is he shy?
No, not at all. I talk a lot. Sorry, Michael.
Oh, okay. But I'm gonna
I'm
pressure
not
him to
shy.
actually talk more about the maps and the star forts.
Well, it's hard to show maps on a radio. That's just that's
I
just the
know.
thing. It
You
it
have
sort
to
of
be more
lacks that
creative.
added. Like I can pull up all kinds of pretty maps and tell you about what I'm looking at, but it doesn't really add anything.
Okay, so what was one of the most astonishing things that you found in the maps, or came about in the maps, like a personal discovery?
Ringed cities is a really interesting thing.
Oh yeah.
There's a bunch of cities all over the world that have a fortification system ringed around the city. And by personal experience, I got a booklet from my mom. She that deals with the fortification system around Amsterdam. And it goes on to describe how this was designed slightly before the First World War, and it is to inundate the area around Amsterdam with about 40 to 50 centimeters of water to deter any marching armies on Amsterdam. And they say this is unique in the world.
That is very interesting, right?
Let me tell you, it's not. About
irrigation,
2 to
yes.
300 kilometers south, you have Antwerp, which was even bigger than Amsterdam and has more forts around it. Another, 500-600 kilometers south of that, you have Paris, which is gigantic and was back in the day. That has 40, 50 forts surrounding it. And I say forts, but it's like a sort of a wedge-shaped bastion. And there's about, I think, 40 to 50 cities all over Europe that have this similar ringed pattern around them. That to me was a really interesting discovery, as they all tell you. It was built in and before World War One, and that makes no sense if you look at some of these old maps, which blatantly tell you this was 17 such and such.
So what do you think the rings were for?
They have something to do with the water. That is pretty evident, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was used for inundation to refertilize the land around the city.
So terraforming, in a way, or irrigation system. That's why the canals go along with them.
The Dutch do it to this day with their tulip fields.
Yeah, one of the big things I do is large-scale land restoration is what I'm moving into, but I've done biodynamics and studied Steiner and a lot of that stuff, and also, permaculture and lots of different kinds of activities with rehydration, of areas. But, the thing is, the ring too, it also, because of the circle pattern, because I know that there's a lot of ceremonies that are used, the hoop, the drum, all these different kinds of frequency technologies. So it also would have had to amplify maybe the energy and the power of the water, right? I mean, because I've studied a lot of Victor Schallenberger's work too about how to return the spirit, the energy, the electrons, all these things back to the water.
Yeah, it could well have something to do with directing or redirecting water, because these star forts are tied to water inevitably. Everywhere you go, like I said, even the ones on hills, I highly suspect they have a spring inside of them.
Well, and if you also did a big ring, it also would keep the city from flooding, because also it would save from flood, if they were worried about the cities being flooded, because it would move the water out to the outskirts to the rings as well. So it could be a lot of, like you guys said early on, like sometimes you find these things and that they have lots of implications.
The multi-purpose direction, definitely.
Yeah, I guess multi-applications, not multi-implications, but applications. Okay, so what else is like amazing that you might find? I always yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is mind-blowing once you see it.
The large fortified cities in both of the Americas, they really opened up a big door for me, connecting everything together again. Like Victor discussed earlier about the Moors and the Amorites, Tartary being in North America. And there's plenty of evidence for that through these fortified cities all over, from like Rio de Janeiro to Quebec.
Yeah, and I have some articles talking about the mound builders built military fortifications. It doesn't state star forts, but what else can you expect if you find star forts around the mounds? And the old scholars of the day talked about the mound builders building these forts. Then the whole narrative of the colonial forts falls apart, and so it should, because those stories make no sense. With like 30 unlearned men waltzing around in the jungle of like Colombia or whatever, or Mexico, and then they just like suddenly built this architectural marvel or marvel out of nowhere, and for no other reason than to defend some random place that they say, here we're gonna camp. Excuse me, why haven't anyone questioned these stories until now? It's well, not to bang anyone's head, because it's also fairly recent for me that I have begun questioning these things, but it just seems so weird that people actually believe that stuff.
Well, I mean, people.
It's mostly the size that is not really all that evident from the ground. I mean, if you go to a star fort and you see the outline, you look at something and say, okay, this is a big place. But the cities don't really show, because you never get a whole image of the city as a human being standing on the ground.
Yeah. In some way,
Exactly.
they are exactly as impressive as pyramids, because
Yeah, they keep telling you, right, that pyramids can't be rebuilt to the standards the Egyptians did back in the day. Well, I want to see them rebuild one of these star forts then.
yeah, I would love to see that as well. And
So
it
what?
just doesn't go mentioned. Like, yeah, they have in the official narrative something called bastion forts, but the concept of star cities, where entire large cities or capitals of Europe are ringed or fortified around by this star fort, is something that has gone unreported in mainstream history.
So do you think that there's one star fort or a few worldwide that all the other little star forts might link up to? Do you think there's like
I
the
think
mama
there's
star forts, the daddy and
I
the mamas?
well, if you want to talk about the Mama Star Forts, you got to go to Valletta in Malta. That's 7 fortified cities, all stuck together, basically.
Wow.
That at current day, I think, is one of the biggest ones. Rome is really big. The old Imperial Palace in Tokyo. Mexico City was an enormous star fort. Victor, any others that like stand out? St. Petersburg in
Yeah.
Russia.
Also, what's it called? Strasbourg is a very large one.
Yep.
In its original conception, Lille from France, well, very grand. Corfu used to be very big as well and containing a lot of. But yeah, we could go on. So many large ones. But I think one of the other impressive things around star forts are these hundreds of kilometers long bastion lines that go into nowhere.
Okay, so what's
And
a bastion line is like a type of basalt?
no, it's like a line that
You've
goes
seen
from
that
a star
video.
fort to another star fort.
You've
So
seen
like an
that video
underground tunnel?
by Sylvie, right? That Starfort video where she
Mm-mm.
talks about a wall in the Ukraine.
No. Mm-mm. I would like to see that though. Could you put it in my Discord?
Will do. Sylvie from that New Earth channel. She has a video on Star
Okay,
Forts.
so when you're talking about the line, this communication line or whatever, what is it? What does it look like? And how does it connect?
A toothed wall.
Toothed wall?
Yeah, I think that's the best explanation. You got 25 kilometers of straight, and then you get a point, a sort of a bastion point, and then you get another 25 kilometers of straight wall, and then you get another point. And there are some old drawings that show these points to have towers.
Oh, I see. Okay, so okay.
So
I think I
think
get
of
it now.
the
So it's the
Chinese
actual
wall.
right. So it's actually how the star fort's built. not necessarily like it connecting underground or something to another star fort, but that is possible too.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And so then they would have antennas, right, at certain points or something to be able to communicate.
Yeah, yeah, antennas, it would seem. We have found some of the forts are called signal forts. So they are signaling other forts in a communication grid. And the antennas look very, large and big. So I would think they did actually have radio communication, not just telegraphy, but also radio. When they say that Tesla invented radio and Marconi stole it, I think the real story is that Tesla knew of radio and showed people how it worked, and that is the redesigning of the Tesla story. And I think the reason
That's
why,
probably why he didn't care about Marconi making something of it, because it wasn't his idea to begin with. It's like, okay,
exactly,
hey.
exactly,
There
we have
is there
heard.
is a, there is a note of that, like saying that Tesla actually congratulated the man on his invention. Didn't give a
Maybe
rat's
that's
ass
the
about.
joke. Maybe that's the joke, the insider joke to the Freemasons. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
maybe.
the whole Tesla thing is you're throwing a bone to a dog. The Tesla thing is really a very powerful invention by them, because they're telling us a lot of truth with him, but they are making us believe that he is the soul, or the original inventor of all this, but
Yes.
he is not. And it
Well, I
would
have.
seem that his father was a priest that was connected to the ancient priesthood of the Orthodox Christians, and the Orthodox Church today is a very interesting faction of the world religions, and they must know a lot about the ancient Russian Greek type of priesthoods existing there in Tartary, and how they were these technological radio priests. And if you know Joseph Farrell, he has written books about Babylon Bangers, for instance, goes into it, that priests of the day were radio communication, crew. They used the churches to send signals and receive signals, and that is why you have the word radio, like radiating God, in it.
Yeah, well,
That is the stuff.
everything that the Catholics did, when they went into areas and the priests could read and write, and so all communications that would come into those areas would go to them, and then they would decide what they want to decipher to the public, whoever, came to the church, and then they would get people to confess things, and they would even kind of use a sleight of hand against the people, because the people, maybe all of them were coming in that week saying, oh, I had sex with my friend's wife. And then that week, the Catholic Church would talk about, what an abomination of, out of marriage sex. And all these people would think that he's God. So the whole establishment of the church, and I think what they did was all kind of about that. That could have been about the communication, the multi applications of communication, right?
Well, if
And
it's about
controlling it.
control, it's about
Yeah.
intelligence, right? So that's why you have all the intelligence communities being controlled by what they call the entity, which is rumored to exist within the Vatican walls. The church sits on top all the intelligence communities. That is how I see it, at least.
I think that's a very, good look at it for sure. That's
The
probably
Vatican, by the
exactly.
way, Star Fort.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, it has that, it has all those different kinds of, I don't know, the Vatican has all that kind of stuff there, doesn't it? Star Fort, it has what, an obelisk, it kind of has some kind of activation with the sun, because, it's all about the worship of the sun. in the sky, not the sun on the cross. And that's how they watch time. I think I was watching a video that somebody put out about that the obelisk in their sundial, or however it works, that's how maybe they're the main time tellers, right? And they decide what the time is and how that's conveyed to the public. And then they keep because I was reading, this other guy put out this video about the fires and stuff and some of the cabal, and he said that their reading of time is totally different. And so how
Yeah.
they relate to time is it's different within their circles, and the time that they give us is different.
Yeah, it's because
and that's even current, like how they do it today.
It's different principles they go off of. For instance, they view Saturn and Jupiter differently, and I would say that a lot of the European dynasties have worshipped Jupiter, and a lot of the Hebrew and Tartarian factions have been Saturnian in their ways. And the Talmud faction of the Jews, I have found out there was an ancient dispute in Tartary and in Canaan, where the Talmud somehow suddenly sprung up amongst some of the Jews, and there was a lot of Jews that rejected the Talmud teachings and moved to Tartary. And I think that is where a lot of the problems we see today starts. This is the point where a lot of Jews seems to be moving to Tartary away from the Talmud Jews, and the Talmud Jews regaining or gaining a lot of power where they stay in Canaan, in Phoenicia, and what is today, Palestine and Israel. So this is where the whole calamity starts, and it has to do with Tartary, and that is why they have covered it up, and that is why the Bolsheviks were all over Russia, and genociding a lot of Tatars and a lot of Christian Russians, and that is why the history is kept from us. In one respect, I would think.
Okay, so guys, I could actually talk to you guys like the rest of the day, but my show's coming to an end. And so we have about 2 minutes. So today I had Nathan and Victor and Michael on, and fantastic 2 hours spent, and I super appreciate it. Want to have you guys on. If you guys want to have a bigger group, a smaller group, want to have you on individually, we'll send out some Skype about that. But you've been listening to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. I'm host Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and we've been talking about all kinds of just amazing things: history, science, free energy, Tartarian civilizations, and just all of the aspects of a lot of things being uncovered. So anyway, will you guys, for the last minute, throw out some websites for people? So there's like Lost History, you guys know. Throw out some websites for people to look up.
Well, stolenhistory.org was the site Nathan spoke about, and you can find.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go on with the Tartary radio.
Tartary Nova. Is it .com or .org, Victor?
It's tartarynova.com. You will find a link to our Discord.
I'm sorry, Victor.
No problem. We'll say it in
from here, man.
We'll say it in unison. That way we'll encapsulate our teamwork spirit.
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, also on minds.com, you can find me under Victor Buggee, Bugge, and then 33. So Victor Buggee 33 on minds.com. You can find me. I post daily. And you can also find Mike under 13th Monkey on minds.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're at the end of the show. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
We'll do it again.
And yeah, I want to do it again immediately. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys soon. See you on Wednesday, everybody.
See you. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.